Welcome back. Today we're going to look at some various and perhaps questionable methods for sheathing a house when you're working solo. If you've been following along, you know that for a couple of the walls of the house, we built and sheathed the wall while it was still on the ground, and then we raised it fully intact. But that's not always practical for every wall, for a variety of reasons. So the majority of this house will need to be sheathed from the outside, and that's what we're going to tackle today. I decided to go with the zip system sheathing for the house. The other option would have just been half-inch plywood and then building wrap like Tyvek. I don't particularly like the building wrap, and it's not for any reason like it doesn't work well or anything. I just, for some reason, don't care for that building method. And with this zip system available, I can put up these panels and just tape the seams and call it a day. There's a 180-day exposure guarantee for the zip system. So if you get it in place, you've got 6 months before you really need to get it sided. I also felt like because of the difficulty of the taller walls in the back, that taping the seams of the zip system is going to be easier than trying to hang building wrap on my own. And so that was the other reason I went with this system. For these first two sheets on the left, you can see they're both 8-foot panels of the zip system stacked one on top of the other. Normally you'd start with an 8-foot sheet below and then put a 4-foot sheet above and then stagger from there for additional stability. But there are so many openings in this wall, but for windows and doors and things like that, that it didn't make much sense to do it that way. So in this case, I just ran two 8-foot sheets on top of one another, and that filled out that framing nicely. Here I'm just using a laser to marry up with the joint from the front wall to identify where the sheathing for this little side wall is going to start. As a reminder, we took a lot of time with the layout when we were framing the walls to make sure that the studs were properly spaced and that when we put up the sheathing that the 8-foot and 4-foot sheets would land precisely on a stud so that we could nail them properly. The critical piece of that is to make sure that you are always laying your sheathing from the same corner in which you initially measured your layout. Otherwise, your studs won't match up and you're going to have a nightmare in terms of trying to sheathe everything efficiently. The tractor worked out great for this part of the build. You can see I could just stack a few sheets of the sheathing on the forks and use that as a platform. Alternatively, because I needed to put the bucket on the tractor, I could just tip the bucket and use the backside of the bucket in order to get up where I needed to go. Then I built this platform. So this is a 4x8 sheet of Advantech subfloor that's been reinforced with a couple of 2x6s and some pallets underneath for easy scooping with the tractor. But this makes for a really great working platform. It looks a little dodgy, but wait, it gets a lot dodgier. But this was enormously helpful. It's only going to help me a little bit because as you can see here, the ground starts falling away and the sheathing needs to get higher and higher. So I do things like this. So let me explain myself. So I put some supports coming out the window and off the edge of the building so that I could get out here on a 2x12 to sheathe some of these higher rows. But I didn't have a good way of securing the other end of that 2x12, so I just used the tractor and propped it up. But it didn't take long to realize that I needed an extension ladder and a ladder jack so that I could do this a bit more properly. So I've got a 24-foot extension ladder. I put a ladder jack on here, which can allow me to land the other end of the 2x12, and it's overlapping that 2x12 that doesn't have a support, but this is really strong, and it looks a little bendy, and it is, but there's no way that that 2x12 is going to snap, so it's a pretty good solid surface to work on. I actually thought I would end up getting a second extension ladder and a second ladder jack, and I could just move that pair of ladders and ladder jacks around the house and make my scaffolding a bit mobile, but it just wasn't practical. Working with these ladders they're heavy, and getting them adjusted correctly and secured and flat and parallel when you're working by yourself is just it's impractical. And so you'll see that I really don't use this ladder a great deal. I find other solutions, but it does help in certain pieces, especially when I need to get up and just nail certain sections of the sheathing. And the other issue is that The ladder that I bought is a 24-foot extension ladder, and it doesn't even come close to getting up to where I need, and so I'll have another solution for that we'll see here in a second. This back wall is mostly windows and doors, so you can see there's two sliding glass doors on the left and right, and there's a window on the bottom and three windows on the top. So there's actually not a lot of sheathing that goes on this side. And because of the number of windows and doors, this side is easier to sheathe just because I have so many places that the sheathing is accessible from within the house. So from within the framing, as you can see there. Again, if you've been watching, you know that I'm a big fan of winches and levers and pulleys and anything that can give me leverage when I'm trying to do something that is either difficult or I'm in a difficult position. So what I do is I have a small pulley, and I can go up to the very top of the rafters and just hang that pulley up there, and then I just use a nylon rope, and the sheathing isn't that heavy, so I can just manually pull the sheathing up, and then I usually wrap the rope that I'm pulling up with. I loop it and then hook it around a screw or something that I'll put in the framing. So you can see here I've got this sheet attached, and I can just pull it all the way up to the very top. And as long as I can get the sheet pretty close to where I need it, then I can manipulate it into place and just get a couple of nails in. And then from there, all I have to do is find a good position to get all of the proper nails in the proper locations for each of the studs that the sheathing lands on. And while this may look a little suspect, I would have been thrilled if the next wall was this easy. I will mention that my wife and I have somewhat of an implicit agreement that I won't do anything that she finds dangerous, so we have to kind of negotiate what that is at times. There I was about 25 feet in the air, and I'm starting to get to that point where I do probably need a little bit of safety equipment, so when I get back up to that height again, I'm going to have a roof harness, just to make sure that if I do fall, I'll at least have something to catch me along the way. So here I continue to use the pulley system. This wall is very inaccessible. It doesn't have a lot of windows. There's not a great way to attach the sheathing from the outside. Here I've got the platform that I built on the tractor, kind of angled up so that I can reach it. But this is probably the last piece that I'm going to be able to reach with any degree of ease. For the sheathing nails, I'm using 2 3/8 inch paper coated grip right nails. I switched from the pass load nails to the grip right nails. I was having a lot of problems with the pass load nails, double tapping or not firing. And when I switched to the grip rights, I had much less of that issue, and they're half the price. I was paying $100 for 2,500 pass load nails, and I can get the same for about $50 or $55 in the grip right. For this wall, I actually placed 2 pulleys at the top that were spaced sort of evenly across about a third of the way in each case, and that just enabled me to switch from one pulley to another depending on which side I was pulling up the sheathing on. And so what I did was drilled a 3/4 inch hole in the top middle part of whichever piece of sheathing I was raising with a paddle bit, and I had just had a small hook that I would hook into that's easily taken out once it gets into place. Here I'll mention in my own defense that this is safer than it looks. The 24-foot extension ladder is fully extended. The very top of the ladder is secured with a rope, so it can't go really in any direction, and the bottom of the ladder is sitting on that platform, but I've also nailed some 2x4s around the base of that ladder, so the bottom of the ladder can't slip at all. The only real issue is that you need to leave the tractor running in order to keep the hydraulics charged. Otherwise, that platform, with the weight of the platform itself and me and the ladder, can pressurize or depressurize those hydraulic lines, and it can sag, and that's not something that you want when you're 20 foot up on a ladder. So here I've got the roofing harness in place, and now I'm 35 feet up in the air, so that definitely makes me feel better when I'm crawling out on the 2x12s. The 2x12s again are very secure, but nonetheless, it's nice to have something extra just in case. So as you can see, my solution for getting up top here is mostly temporary scaffolding. What I'm using are 2x6s that come out of each window and off the edge of one of the corners, and then those 2x6s also have a brace on the inside. The 2x6 is more than enough to support the weight that we're talking about. There's no way that that 2x6 is going to snap. So really just having enough screws and that secondary brace in place is all you really need to make sure that you have a good solid foundation. The other nice thing is that this scaffolding can pretty much stay in place until I start installing the windows. And so that'll just give me the opportunity to get out and do other things that I may need to do ahead of that time. This is where I'm at. Thanks for watching. See you next time.